Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some PathOfExile discussion. Grinding Gear Games today announced the November event details, and I thought I would go through the Mayhem event, which is going to be the first of these events running from the 4th of November to the 14th of November, and give a few tips and some suggestions as to builds you might want to play. These are not going to be full build guides. Instead, they're just going to be some ideas of the key interactions builds are based around. So you should play this event if and only if you want a little bit of mayhem in your life and your game, you're done with Calandra League, and you are not playing it just for the prizes. You should only play this event if it looks like it's going to be fun. I shouldn't really have to say this, but there's always people who say, I would play this event except for the prizes for hitting level 50 are not very good. You should play it if and only if it's going to be fun, and just completely ignore the fact that the prizes exist. Exception for that is if you're someone that's super competitive and you're going to try to be first to hit level 100 or something like that, in which case then your fun is actually the competitive side. So there are 8 types of mayhem in this event. Each zone is going to have 2 difficulty mods plus 1 mayhem mod. Now this is going to apply to zones throughout the storyline, and it's also going to apply to specific maps. These will change hourly on the hour, so if Alice and Bob both open a port map at 1:45 AM, then those port maps will have the same mayhem mods in them. If Alice then opens another one at 1:51 AM, it will also have the same mods. If Bob then opens a strand map at 1:57 AM, then that strand might have different mods. If Alice then opens another port map at 2:01 AM, because the hour's ticked over, it'll be randomized and it'll be different again. The different mayhem mods that can exist: plus 20 rogue exiles in the zone, plus 20 strongboxes in the zone, plus 20 invasion bosses in the zone, plus 10 breaches in the zone, plus 20 harbingers in the zone, plus 20 tormented spirits in the zone, plus 1 delirium mirror, and monsters killed in the area summon Scourge/Beyond monsters. Now it's worth saying that these mods are not equal to each other and pointing out the key difference here. So 2 of these are a bit slower than the rest. This is breaches and harbingers. These are going to take a fair bit of time in order to kill everything, and I think that most players are not going to kill everything. They're just going to kill what has already spawned. Of course, if you would rather kill everything, then go ahead and do so. The next one that needs to be pointed out is the super dangerous one, plus 20 tormented spirits. This is going to obliterate people in hardcore, and in the softcore version of the events, this is going to result in much death and destruction. Tormented spirits are easy to underestimate because it's so easy to kill them when they're not in a rare monster. In fact, it's so easy that we tend to do it by accident all the time. But once they do get settled into a rare monster, especially if you get 4 or more of them into the same rare monster, or worse, into the same significant boss, then these things become really deadly. Tormented spirits are definitely not going to be anything to laugh at in this event, and you really want to have a way to kill them, and you also probably want to avoid the zones that have tormented spirits in them. Obviously, you can't do this while you're going through the campaign, but after the campaign finishes, once you're in maps, you probably don't want to do zones that have this torment mechanic in them. Alternately though, maybe you decide you want to set up your atlas around torment and just embrace the madness, embrace the mayhem, and see how much loot you can get out of these things. Finally, we have the ones that I think are the more lucrative: the rogue exiles, strongboxes, and invasion bosses. It's not so much that these drop tremendously good loot, it's just that there's going to be a lot of it. A lot of chances to roll the dice on items, and in particular with the exiles and the invasion bosses, a lot of unique items, and also a lot of rare items while you're still at the point in progression while rare items are still loot. And it's worth pointing out that until you probably hit about level 90, 91, 92 on your first character, you're still going to be picking up things like a rare citrine amulet or a rare amethyst ring. The better bases, you're going to be picking these up and identifying them. Most of them will be rubbish, some of them will be quite good. Eventually you'll hit a point where the only plausible path forward is crafting upgrades, but for many people that'll be quite late in the event for them. Delirium and Scourge I think will be a little bit disappointing in this event. They're the normal versions of those mods, whereas everything else is dialed up to 11. I don't think they're going to be particularly impactful, but Delirium will be good as a source of cluster jewels. Lots of people will want cluster jewels, you probably yourself will want some cluster jewels, and also because the event doesn't run super long, there'll be a whole lot of people that never get the best cluster jewels for their build, and therefore they'll be interested in getting whatever's second best. Maybe their build ideally wants a minions 8 cluster, but they can't get it, and so they settle for a minions 9 or a minions 10 instead. A couple words on your Atlas setup and favorited map system use. So the 317 to 319 era Atlas heavily rewards specialization. It's better to be a master of one trade than a jack of all of them. So you should pick a couple of mechanics and spec hard into them, and if you're in doubt, expeditions, strongboxes, and essences. You can't go wrong with any of those. Now, you won't get access to the favorited map system for a while, or at least you won't get much access to it. Well, if and when you do start to get a bunch of those favorited maps unlocked, favorite 3 or 4 different maps. In this situation, even if 1 or 2 of them have horrible hourly mods on them, you can just jump into a different map tile set instead. Optional setup number 1, take every strongbox node on the entire atlas, take shadow shaping, and then run maps that are known to have strongboxes in them. So shadow shaping is the one that converts your favorited maps into a banned list, and also causes a percentage of your maps to have a valuable implicit on them. So this will mean that you'll get a diverse selection of maps that you'll be able to run, and you'll be able to liaise with other players. There will definitely be some sort of tracking system that's going on that's crowdsourced by other players that will be tracking what mods are affecting in which zones. And using that information, you'll be able to prioritize zones that have strongboxes in them. Then you can run them and get the benefits of all of those strongbox nodes that you've got on your atlas. The other optional setup, and this is really, really dangerous, this is absolutely softcore only, and even in softcore, this is going to get you splattered a lot of times. Take Seance, Unrelenting Torment, Exiled Will. Exiled Will being the thing that makes all rogue exiles be ghosted. Unrelenting Torment causes a more multiplier to the amount of items that are dropped by ghosted monsters. And Seance causes a bunch of rare monsters on your map to also gain a ghost in them. And then you want to chase the zones that have rogue exiles in them. When you're doing this, you will be a massive source of unique items, because all the rogue exiles you kill will have a huge boost to their amount of quantity and rarity by virtue of being affected by a tormented spirit. And then Unrelenting Torment's going to scale that. Seance is going to scale that for a bunch of the rare monsters as well. All these will have a lot of synergy with each other. But just be aware that this is super, super rippy. This is not something to do if you're intending to gain even 1 more level in the event, because once you set up your atlas that way, you're probably going to be dying every second map. So what are some of the build consequences of these mechanics? Well, maps will be swimming with mini-bosses. In tier 10 ones, these rogue exiles and invasion bosses and the like have something like 1.5 million hit points. In tier 16 maps, this is about quadruple that, around 6 million hit points. So these monsters are going to be pretty durable, and as a result, some skills are going to struggle. The skills that will struggle the most are the ones that scatter damage in small amounts to the entire screen. I'm calling out Herald of Ice specifically here, but it's not the only one. A lot of damage over time skills may also suffer this as well. These skills may take a little bit of time to whittle down some of these monsters, and on things like Herald of Ice that are conditional, they may not be able to kill these things effectively at all. For that reason, I think there's a number of things you want to look for to have in your build if you can. You want burst damage, things like cooldown traps, and also some specific Val skills that perform extremely well against bosses strike me as excellent choices to use. Val skills can be used several times per map, and something like Val Lightning Strike is extremely good in that situation, where you can use it when you come across a scary rogue exile, and then you can have it available again for the map boss. You're also going to take some pretty unpredictable damage in this event, and this is going to include ailments as well. Now, the ailments you're going to have to be most scared of, I think, are going to be shock. Shock in particular, because you'll get shocked by an exile that might be at the side of the screen. Not just an exile, could be an invasion boss, could be something else. And then some sort of telegraphed hit that you knew you could survive is going to hit you, except suddenly now you can't survive it because that rogue exile chunked you for 1200 and inflicted you a shock on you, and you don't have enough health left anymore. For that reason, I think that being immune to elemental ailments is going to be quite important in this event. Not just elemental ailments, you want to have some sort of mitigation for things like bleed as well, but that's something players tend to build for as early as they can in any case. This is not going to be a glass cannon friendly event. So yeah, more Val Lightning Strike here. Val Lightning Strike champion looks like it'll be really good, but we'll get to some build ideas later, one of which is going to be that. Next thing we need to talk about is item availability. At the very start of the event, it's a fresh economy, so boss drops won't be available. Also, a number of the boss access keys will take a little while to become available too, just like a league start. So don't count on having access to something like Dying Sun 8 hours into the event. Although if you're good at making currency, then maybe you will be able to get a Dying Sun by the second day. With so many extra rare and unique monsters in each zone, I expect that tier 2 to 5 drop anywhere uniques will quickly become pretty common. So this is things like Chevron's Wrappings and more common uniques than that. I think that all of these will become pretty accessible in a reasonable time frame. Tier 2 might take a little bit longer, but tier 3, 4, and 5, these should be pretty accessible pretty quickly. Now, early league, you might want to farm zones like the Ledge or Tidal Island in order to hunt a Tabula Rasa and or a Goldrum early on. It's hard to say for certain exactly how viable that's going to be, because GGG tend to fiddle around with Act 1 a little bit in order to prevent any of these mechanics feeling so powerful that they feel mandatory. So I'm not going to recommend any specific zone. But in the absence of GGG making any unexpected changes, I would say check Tidal Island first, check the Ledge second. If either of them have rogue exiles in them or have invasion bosses in them, then this is probably the place to get a tabular and a goldrum. Now there's a number of items that come exclusively from side content. I'm talking things like the rarer fossils, talking things like leadership's price from Heist, or even the more common Heist uniques like Nadir mode. These are going to be scarce. If the side content requires setup, then it's not going to be very many people that do that setup, and as a result, you shouldn't plan on having these items at all, unless the items are very common or you're willing to do all that setup yourself. So definitely don't build around leadership's price. I think that would be a really bad idea, even though Heist is on the map device this league. And this also goes against playing a chaos damage over time build, because the cheapest way to get a chaos damage over time weapon is to use some of the rarer fossils in order to craft it. And they're not going to be very common in this event. Okay, so what are 5 builds that I would suggest as options here? The first one is a Trickster Cold Conversion Critical Strike Spectral Shield Throw build. This has great energy shield recovery as long as you've got things to hit or kill, and you should prioritize trading for the unique shield Emperor's Vigilance if you want to play this build, which might actually be fairly difficult. I don't know whether it's tier 1 or tier 2 rarity, but it's definitely not tier 3 or more common. It's not something that's super available, but it's also not something that's like Headhunter rarity or anything like that. It will be something you'll be able to get, but you may not be able to get it day 1 or day 2. Second choice is Explosive Trap Saboteur. Saboteur I really like because it's in a spot on the tree that's very easy to get a lot of spell suppression, and you also scale off your gem level. And it's something that's happened in recent years in Path of Exile. Gem leveling has gotten faster. It's that player clear speed has generally gone up over time, and the amount of XP that is required to level a gem was set back around patch 1.1 or so, back when the game was much slower paced than it is today. So for that reason, you can get yourself up to a level 20 explosive trap pretty quickly, and this skill scales incredibly well with gem level. Next, we have the Vaal Lightning Strike Champion. Not really much to say here. This is meta in the Calandra League for a reason, but it's probably going to be even better in this event where the champion's tremendous defenses will be extraordinarily good against all of the unpredictable damage you'll be taking, and where Vaal Lightning Strike can really shine because it's an extra burst of damage when you really need it. Righteous Fire Inquisitor comes up next, another meta build that's something that's fallen off in popularity as the league's gotten older. Not because the build's gotten worse, but just because a lot of people have transitioned away from it once they've built an initial currency base with it. However, it's something that's a strong build even if you can't get the Maven's Boots, and becomes a lot better when you're able to get those. I would, however, highly recommend that you prioritize getting shock immunity on this character, because you are really going to need it. And finally, we've got the Boneshatter Juggernaut. Boneshatter Juggernaut's doing really well in Delve this league because it is just thick, and it's also something that is good against unpredictable damage from monsters. So if you've got a Harbinger boss firing at you from off screen with its own spells and summoning Harbinger versions of Stygian Revenants that are exploding corpses around you, then the Juggernaut is in a good place to laugh a lot of that damage off, whilst being adequate, not extraordinary, but adequate at dishing out the pain itself. It's a build that's just really defensively strong, and that's why I think it's in a good place. Anyways, that's a few initial thoughts about the Mayhem event. May your Vaal Orbs have interesting results.